Welcome to this edition of the Million Dollar Mastermind podcast. This is where we pick the brains of high achievers from all walks of life and get their hard-earned, real-world insights on winning. I'm your host, Larry Weidel. Yeah, when you see something other people don't see, which is what the visionaries do, and what you saw with your water, it gives you a clarity and a strength that other people, that the status quo, the thing is you didn't realize right from the beginning you were going to be fighting the status quo. And because you didn't want limitations, you were smart enough coming up to recognize, limitations. You said the limitation word. A lot of people don't think about that. The deal is like, do the job you are today, but raise your eyes and look down the road. Is the company you're in, the industry you're in, what you're doing, are there limitations there? How do you feel about those limitations? Are you going to accept those things? Or are you going to do things to allow you to, where you will have unlimited potential, and that's what, the big companies, the things that people listening to this need to realize, don't be discouraged if you get out there and get put down by people that are the respected, reputable, established companies, the big behemoths out there, because they are invested in keeping things pretty much the same way. And they're stilted, they do things the same way. Now, what happens is they go down because they lose out on talent like you. And, people who could be creative, think outside the box, highly motivated, don't want to be put into a square and stay there, cubicle. And, they want, they've got more energy. And so that's why the young companies have a chance. They give you more opportunity. They're going to attract people who probably are turned down, by the big established companies, and that's probably a good thing. If you got turned down there, raise your sights and think, maybe this can be good for me, because maybe I'd be in a slow growth or a limited growth situation if I got what I thought was a dream job. I'll tell you something. Which you could relate to. We had conventions in Atlanta, and we would always stay at the Georgia Dome. At the time, it was the Georgia Dome Convention Center down there. And one time we were in there, and I'm at the CNN elevator with Ted Turner and Jane Fonda, waiting for the elevator. And this is when they were just starting together. And he was talking to her. I just happened to overhear him. He said, the thing is, he said, he said, I just thought about it today. He said, I'm not actually qualified to get a job, any job that they have here at CNN. He said, I'm not qualified to fill any job there, because unfortunately, I don't have to. It doesn't matter, because, I own the company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and that's the thing. I mean, Ted was just, is very funny. I think that
then he said, in this building, the whole building here, he said, I could never afford a building like this, but fortunately, I built it.
Yeah, no, it's so funny. I mean, it was, So when I left that and moved to San Francisco, I was actually, my husband, my fiance at the time, was graduating from law school and wanted to do this thing called technology law. And no one was doing technology law in 1994. So we moved, and I thought maybe I was taking a break, but I thought maybe I go to a regional office and work at CNN and do what I was doing. But instead, I thought maybe I'd do something else. I mean,
right.
I don't know. I'm not wedded to it. I've only been in both of these, types of media for the last few years. So maybe I go do something else. So anyway, that was when I stumbled upon this CD-ROM shopping company, and it was primarily because of this fascination with Steve Jobs. I wouldn't have been able to really articulate it. It was like, for me, that was the story, was how I connected, why it was interesting to me, because I had, I could rattle off sort of some of the cool things that he had done for the computer industry, but I didn't know how they worked. And I think go ahead.
Do you remember what the guy told you about his experience for what it was like to work with Steve Jobs?
Well, I think, he would say that he was, very much how I think most founders are, that he had strong opinions. He was relentless in actually focusing on, what was kind of the goal and getting it done. And he, the interesting thing for me, sort of thinking back on it, is I think he definitely micromanaged.
Yeah.
Many people who worked alongside him that I've, been fortunate to meet over the years. But I think that, looking at sort of the most successful founders in many different industries, which I've been really fascinated and have studied, I think that there's a consistent thread amongst, you've got to be able to lead a company. You've got to be able to have that vision in order to get people to jump in the boat with you, right? Yeah. And I think what Steve was probably doing, while supporters may call it micromanaging, I think Steve was very good at hiring people who knew more than he did. I think primarily because he wanted to learn from them, and he wanted to be better. He wanted to win, right? He had an idea, and he hired people probably because he was curious about things and he wanted to achieve things. So that was, really smart. But I think more than anything, you have to keep pushing the line forward for people and setting goals. But sometimes that's hard, right? I think that especially if you're not articulating the goal and the new goal constantly, it just depends. But I think that the other thing about Steve that's obvious to anybody listening is, that he was about simplicity and about the messaging, and that the consumer didn't need to know how things worked. They just needed to know that they did.
Right. And you get a product that they want, and I've always said about if people think like Disney World, Disneyland, what do you think of? Fun, great with smiles, the family, and a great experience. And I said, yeah, that's what you think of. That's the veneer. But underneath, behind there, you've got the most technologically advanced machinery, software, employee training, this, that, and the other, to deliver that ice cream type experience. They hide all that from you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to take a sip of hint right now. Here's the hint bottle. But a lot of people have said, why don't more people knock you off and do this product? Like, how have you maintained such a large lead in this category?
Yeah, that's a good question, because how hard could it be?
How hard could it be? And it ends up that it's pretty tough, because you're using real fruit. People want to cut corners and make it products.
There you go.
They want to use, flavor houses and things that are, you're not going to get the right taste. It's not that it hasn't had competition over the years. Coke had tried to knock it off 5 times in the last 17 years.
5 times.
But they did it with a couple different, I think, mistakes. First of all, they used the Dasani, name.
Right.
And they added essence to it. And I think that there is a perception that goes along with Dasani, like it or not, that the consumers have. Yeah. And so to actually create with that name something new that you want people to have a positive feeling, you're almost working against yourself. That's number one. And number two, they used the cherry syrup that they probably use in cherry Coke to actually, create the product. But what was fascinating to me, and it's something that, I talk about in the book too, I used to think, primarily because people would tell us this, especially when we were early on trying to get shelf space or raise money, they're like, as soon as Coke or Pepsi comes out with a competitive product, you're toast. I mean, you're done. And so many investors or potential investors would say, we're not going to invest in you. And it actually ends up that started to happen. Those were really like bad days for me mentally, because I thought, okay, this is the beginning of the end now that Coke and Pepsi have launched competitive products. But it ends up that competition is actually a really good thing because they help bring awareness to the category. Right? And it's not to say that it wasn't disruptive. I remember the first time at a major retailer, Target. We were in Target, and then we got the phone call that we were getting bumped out of Target because their category captain, which was at that time Coca-Cola, had decided that they wanted to use our space for this competitive product. And I thought, oh, okay, well, so where are we going to go? And they said, you're out. So we got kicked out of there. And the irony, actually, few lessons learned from that. First of all, always have options.
Always have options.
Always have options.
You're the leader. Look down the road, see what's coming. And you can be mad, you can be sad, you can hate Target, you can hate Coca-Cola, you can do all these things, but the real problem is you have nowhere to go, right? And so that's really what you're most upset about, because you didn't have options, and you can sort of play that strategy out for lots of different bad situations that could occur along the way. But what ended up happening is they not only got the space that we had in Target, but Coke also got more space than we got. And because they were, important customers to Target. And then about 3 months later, we got a phone call from Target, and they said, Coke decided that they don't want to, the numbers weren't good enough for them. They didn't sell enough product, and they aren't going to do this category anymore. And we actually like the category. We have consumers that want the category. So we're inviting you back in, and not only inviting you back in, but you get the additional space that Coke had. So we gained space. I mean, never thought that would happen. Never thought.
Yeah. And so every time a competitor launched, we gained space.
Yeah, amazing.
Because they wouldn't be able to, and that's the other thing that I learned about if you have this is the mentality of large companies. So their success measurement is different than my success measurement.
Right. There you go.
And so they're sitting there looking at comparing their numbers to Smart Water or Coke or, whatever. And I mean, I'm just looking at, growth for my brand and trying to figure out how I keep gaining space. And so the more times that they continued to come into the space, by the time it happens, the second time, I was excited when we had competition. And that, frankly, is, a big business lesson that I share with people. over and over again, that if you actually have multiple people in your category, it's, I'm not saying that it isn't scary at times, but it's like, focus on what you can control.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to the Million Dollar Mastermind. If you felt there were any valuable takeaways from this episode, please take a minute and leave us a 5-star review. Your feedback is important and really helps us get the word out to a wider audience. Remember, we have a valuable webinar that is absolutely free. Register for it right now at weidelonwinning.com. Thanks for listening.